From a pure tax perspective, pensions are one of the most powerful wealth building tools available. But FIRE changes the question completely. You're not alone in asking how to maximize wealth by age 67. You're asking how to stop working years, perhaps even decades before that. Now let's start with pensions, because there's a reason why they're so popular. Imagine that you're a basic rate taxpayer. You contribute £80 and the government then tops it up to £100. Money for nothing. If you're a higher rate taxpayer, the benefits can be even greater. Before you've earned a single penny of investment growth, you've already received a substantial boost. Add employer contributions into the mix, and it's easy to see why pensions are often described as free money. Then you have decades of tax efficient growth work in your favour. On paper, pensions look absolutely unbeatable. But pensions have one major drawback for its early retirees. You can't access them whenever you want. This means someone planning to retire at 50 may have to wait 7 years or more before accessing their pension. If you want to retire at 45, the gap becomes even larger. This creates what many retirees call the bridge problem. How do you fund those years between stopping work and being able to access your pension? This is where the ISA starts to look much more attractive. Unlike a pension, an ISA doesn't care how old you are. You can withdraw money tomorrow if you want. You can withdraw money at 43, at 50, 55, or 65. There are no access restrictions and no penalties. Every pound of growth is tax free and every withdrawal is tax free. While the ISA lacks the upfront tax relief of a pension, it gives you something that's arguably just as important as FIRE: flexibility. ISA equals flexibility. To understand why this matters, let's look at two hypothetical investors. Investor A contributes almost everything into their pension. Investor B splits their savings between a pension and an ISA. 20 years later, investor A has a pension worth £1 million, and investor B has a pension worth £700,000 and an ISA worth £300,000. So investor A has £1 million and investor B has £700,000 and a £300,000 K ISA. Investor A appears to have one. Their pension is larger and have maximised tax relief throughout their working life. But who can actually retire at 50? In many cases, investor B. Why? Because they have that £300,000 in their ISA, which they can fund there for all those years before they can access their pension. Investor A may be wealthier overall, but much of their wealth is trapped behind the pension rules. This is one of the most important concepts in FIRE planning. Net worth alone doesn't determine whether you can retire. The location of your assets does matter. A pound inside a pension is not the same thing as a pound inside an ISA when you're trying to retire early. They perform completely different functions. One is optimized for long-term retirement income, the other is optimized for accessibility and flexibility. So many people think that the solution is simply to calculate their FIRE number and then invest as aggressively as possible. But that is another question that needs answering. How is your FIRE number structured? Suppose you calculate that you need £800,000 to retire. If that £800,000 is sitting inside a pension, retiring at 50 may be impossible. If £250,000 of that sits inside an ISA and the rest inside the pension, then the picture changes dramatically. Suddenly you have a bridge that you can carry your retirement date to pension access age. Let's look at another practical example. Imagine you want to spend £30,000 per year in retirement and you plan to retire at the age of 50. If your pension access begins at 57, you may need 7 years of spending before your pension becomes available. 7 years multiplied by £30,000 equals £210,000. In reality, you would probably want a much larger buffer to account for the inflation, market volatility, and any unexpected expenses. So perhaps your target bridge fund should become maybe between the 250 and even maybe £300,000. Once you start thinking this way, the role of the ISA becomes much clearer. It isn't competing against the pension, it's solving a completely different problem. That's why I believe the ISA versus pension debate is often framed incorrectly. Many people ask which one is better, and that's the wrong question. The real question is what role each account plays in your retirement strategy. A pension is incredibly effective at building long-term retirement wealth. An ISA is incredibly effective at providing flexibility and accessibility. The most successful FIRE plans often use a combination of both. So what does a practical FIRE strategy look like? First, if your employer offers pension matching, just grab it with both hands. Take full advantage of it. Employer matching is one of the best returns you'll ever receive on your money. Turning it down is like refusing a pay rise. Second, think carefully about your target retirement age. The earlier you want to retire, the larger your bridge fund will have to be. Third, build enough accessible wealth to cover the years before pension access age. For many people, that means making ISA contributions a major part of their overall strategy. Fourth, continue building pension wealth for decades that follow. Remember, retirement may last 30 or 40 years. That bridge only gets you to pension access age. The pension still has an enormous role to play in funding the rest of your life. And there's also another advantage to having both ISAs and pensions that often gets overlooked: flexibility during retirement. Imagine reaching age of 57 with a healthy pension and a healthy ISA. You now have choices. You could decide which account to withdraw from. You could potentially manage your tax position much more effectively. You can respond to changing legalization. You can adjust your withdrawals if markets perform poorly. And you can create a retirement income strategy that adapts to your circumstances rather than being locked into a single source of wealth. Now, one of the reasons I like this approach is that it acknowledges uncertainty. Nobody knows what pensions rule will look like in 20 years from now, and nobody knows what future governments will do with tax allowances, and nobody knows how the markets will perform. Now, none of this means pensions are bad. Far from it. In fact, pensions remain one of the most powerful tools available to UK investors. That mistake isn't about having too much money in a pension. The mistake is about having too much money in a pension relative to your early retirement goals. If you're planning to retire at 67, the conversation may not matter very much. Planning to retire at 50, it matters enormously. So when somebody asks me whether they should prioritize an ISA or pension for FIRE, my answer is usually the same. Stop thinking about them as competitors, but start thinking about them as partners. The ISA is your bridge. The pension provides the engine that powers the decades beyond pension access age. One helps you retire early, the other helps you stay retired. Ultimately, successful FIRE planning isn't about maximizing a pension balance or maximizing an ISA balance. It's about building the right combination of assets to support the life you want to live. Because financial independence isn't measured by how much money you have, it's measured by whether your money allows you to do what you want to do and when you want to do it. And for most people pursuing early retirement, that means an ISA and a pension working together rather than choosing one over the other.